Palm Beach County is sitting on more than $250 million to spend on coronavirus relief. And while small businesses need the money now, they'll have to keep waiting for their share of the funds.
I-Team reporter Danielle Wall is live in West Palm Beach with more on that. Danielle?
And Jim and Liz, county commissioners tell me they are still debating how much money will be going to these small businesses. And once they decide that, they need to decide who is eligible for those funds. But pressure is mounting on the board to act now as we continue to see job losses and business closures each week. Palm Beach County was awarded $260 million in federal relief from the CARES Act. Commissioners learned about that amount back on April 24th. Right now, the plan is to give $50 million of that money to small businesses. And commissioners are talking about creating an application process to make sure it's the right businesses getting those funds. I spoke to Commissioner Hal Valasche about this process. He says he expects it to take weeks, not months, but they do have until the end of this year to spend the money. Some say they're not acting fast enough. In a letter obtained by CBS 12 News, a state representative and a Boca City councilman tell commissioners the key to making this relief meaningful is that these funds be made available and dispersed as soon as possible. Commissioner Valasche says he understands the urgency, but he says they need time to do this right.
It's got to be done correctly. If we wind up dispersing a lot of money quickly, but to the wrong people, that defeats the whole purpose of the grant.
I'm just not sure the county's acting fast enough. And I get it, we have to be responsible and we want to make sure it goes to the right places, but the time is now. You know, it's time to distribute the funds.
Now, that letter from State Representative Schlossberg and Boca Councilman Andy Thompson requests that the county give more money to small businesses than originally planned. They want to increase that number from $50 to $80 million. As for the rest of the 200 or so million, it has been preliminarily earmarked for things like testing, housing assistance, emergency food disbursement. All of this will come up for debate again at the next commissioners' meeting scheduled for this Friday. Live in West Palm Beach, Danielle Waugh, CBS 12 News.
Well, county commissioners didn't just vote to reopen beaches. They also voted to fast track the process for dispensing millions of dollars from the federal CARES Act.
Yeah, this comes after CBS 12 News did a series of reports on why more than $250 million of coronavirus stimulus money was yet to be distributed by the Palm Beach County team. Our I-Team reporter Danielle Wall joining us live from West Palm Beach now on today's vote.
Yeah, Jim, all week pressure was mounting on the board to stop sitting on hundreds of millions of dollars in this federal aid and get it into the hands of the people who need it right now before it is too late. Well, today it seems that message was received.
I think our businesses are really starving, and we need to see this move forward.
Palm Beach County commissioners, acknowledging the urgency, approved $50 million in funding for small businesses suffering under coronavirus closures.
That item passes 7-0.
It comes after growing criticism that $260 million in stimulus money the county got from the federal CARES Act was sitting in the bank instead of out in the community where it is desperately needed.
The sooner they get that money out on the street, the better.
Boca Raton council member Andy Thompson has been calling for action, saying cities like his have stepped up to help their local businesses, but can only do so much.
We're talking about crumbs compared to the full loaf of bread that Palm Beach County has received from the federal government.
Friday, county staff outlined specific plans for the money, including $25,000 in grants for shops, salons, restaurants, and other small businesses to help pay staff and expenses. Commissioner Hal Valasche wants to limit funding to operations the county deems viable.
What I'm afraid could happen here is if we're just taking this on a first-come, first-served basis and giving $25,000 to anybody who asks, we're going to wind up giving $25,000 to a lot of businesses that are ultimately going to fail anyway.
But that's a consideration for later. Right now, commissioners have committed to begin accepting applications no later than next Friday.
The state unemployment system has failed them. The DEO grant program has failed them. The PPP loan program has failed them. We are going to be the funding of last resort for some of these companies that have been hanging on for 2 months.
The county says they will begin accepting paper applications first, but they're also developing an online process as well. As for the rest of the $200 or so million from the Federal CARES Act, how they're spending that is still being debated. Live in West Palm Beach, Danielle Waugh, CBS 12 News.
Out to the CARES Act spending controversy right here in Palm Beach County.
As thousands of small business owners wait for relief from the federal stimulus funds, Palm Beach County commissioners are using $5 million from the coronavirus aid to create a shelter in Pahokee. Danielle Waugh tells us why some say this isn't in the spirit of the emergency relief money.
This apartment complex behind me in Pahokee will be turned into what's called a non-congregate shelter, a place where people who need to quarantine and isolate can live temporarily during the COVID-19 crisis. Commissioners approved $5 million out of their CARES Act money to convert this property into the shelter, and they say once this pandemic is over, the complex will be used for homeless and transitional housing for the Glades community. A small business owner in Wellington is taking issue with this. She tells me homeless housing is not what the CARES Act should be for, and that money should instead be going toward business owners who need it. However, county commissioners think otherwise.
The CARES Act money is specifically designed to be used for anything that incurred during the COVID crisis, and mostly for the purpose of restarting our businesses, our economy.
It wasn't just meant for small business assistance. Non-congregate living is one of the categories that FEMA has asked us to look at. It is the best way to reduce possible exposure.
So far, Palm Beach County has awarded $1.3 million in small business grants from their CARES Act funds. There are still about 4,000 people who have applied for that money who are waiting to hear back. Meanwhile, work on this shelter will take place over the next few months and should be open for housing by December. In Pahokee, Danielle Waugh, CBS 12 News.
The CBS 12 News I-team first began reporting last month. Palm Beach County received more than $250 million in federal aid as part of the massive coronavirus relief package.
In our initial series of reports, the I-team asked why tens of millions earmarked for small businesses hadn't been spent. Now those dollars are flowing, but money that was supposed to go to help towns and cities is, as they say, sitting in the bank. CBS 12 investigative reporter Danielle Waugh has that story.
Elected officials from cities and towns across Palm Beach County say this is what the CARES Act was for, and now they're wondering if and when they'll be getting their money.
We have to keep reaching deeper and deeper into our pockets to do it this way. They have millions of dollars set aside for this very thing. We just want them to help us out with it.
$2 million. That's how much money City Councilman Andy Thompson says Boca Raton has spent on COVID so far. He and other city officials expected some of the $250 million in CARES Act money that the county received to go to reimburse Boca Raton for things like masks and overtime pay. But they say there's been no response from county commissioners.
Maybe they are hoping that they can spend all $261 million of it themselves. I don't know. But that wasn't the intent of the CARES Act.
Some of those who voted to pass the CARES Act seem to agree. 3 members of Congress co-signed this letter from Thompson to Palm Beach Mayor Dave Kerner, urging the county to start reimbursing local governments. Officials from Boynton Beach, Delray, Jupiter, and West Palm Beach also signed. But so far, there are no plans to pay these cities back. County Commissioner Hal Valashay told the I-team he's looking into it, but added, I know that our initial allocation of the $261 million CARES funds didn't include municipalities. It's not the first time the I-team has questioned the county's handling of the CARES Act windfall. Last month, we reported that the county was sitting on tens of millions meant for small business relief. After those stories began to air, commissioners fast-tracked a grant program. Councilman Thompson hopes for a similar result now.
The last time when we had this discussion about the CARES Act dollars, very quickly after that, the problem was solved because the money was deployed very quickly, thanks to some good reporting. My hope is that we continue to be able to collaborate with the county. They see that this is kind of what the CARES Act was intended for, that this money that they're holding should be used for that purpose, and that they create the reimbursement process quickly.
In Boca Raton, Danielle Waugh, CBS 12 News.